us have got the ability to pull off some pretty incredible things. The difference is that some people are afraid of taking that first step.
His willpower, I really don't know where he gets it from. It must come right down in the gut there. I had a couple of trips with Woz, with his legs, and when he lost them, he didn't ever seem to want to give up having these wilderness experiences. And he just looks up there at that summit, that peak, and his dream all the way through is to pitch the tent up there, and I'm sure that's going to happen.
Sometimes it seems like my whole life has been preparation for what I've got to deal with now. Growing up in the western suburbs of Melbourne, I didn't have a lot of aspiration at all. I was basically working and living for the weekend, doing the weekend warrior thing. At work, I'd look around the office and think, God, some of these guys have been here for 20 years. I couldn't even begin to imagine how they could do that. When the chance came to travel overseas with some mates, I threw in my career as a technical officer and went travelling through the US and Europe before going to Africa. It was in Africa that I felt I functioned at my best, far away from the Western comforts that we take for granted. Being there gave me the feeling of being alive, of being part of the real world. Little did I know that everything I'd learned in my travels about hardship and discomfort would be tested to the limit during my 2 days on Hinchinbrook.
We got the call late afternoon that there was a hiker trapped under a large boulder. I was given to understand he'd been there for 2 days.
We want to show him that we're helping somebody.
We were on scene about 2.5 hours, most of that time spent resuscitating him and getting the boulder off. I thought we almost lost him twice, particularly when we removed the boulder, but he seemed to come back each time, which attests to his good physical condition.
In April 1997, I set out to climb Mount Bowen, the highest peak on Hinchinbrook Island in North Queensland, with Geert van Koolen, a Dutch guy I'd only met the day before. After setting up camp for the night, I went to take a leak. I started climbing a steep wall to move away from the creek. The next thing I know, I'm flat on my back with this incredible weight grinding down into my legs.
I didn't think he was alive at first, and I think once he realized we were there, he roused and really he put forth a heroic effort to get himself out of there.
Chip told me later that he'd carried with him a saw to amputate both my legs on site if need be. We both agreed that we were damn glad he hadn't had to use it. I had 13 operations in 18 days. For the first 2 weeks I was sure I was going to die. Taking control of what was left of my life was largely a case of overcoming each small obstacle as it arose. Learning how to walk again on prosthetic legs gave me the biggest challenge I'd ever had. I had people tell me not to get my hopes up, which only motivated me to try even harder. I took it on as a personal goal and became determined to walk out of that hospital. I desperately needed to find out if I could ever get back into the wilderness again. The realisation that it wasn't over for me yet came just 10 months after the accident. Over 3 gruelling days, I dragged myself up Tasmania's Cradle Mountain. This gave me a taste of what I thought I'd lost, and I wanted more. Getting to Federation Peak will mean negotiating the notoriously muddy track across the Arthur Plains before traversing the crags and plateaus of the Eastern Arthurs. The peak is 43 kilometres from the nearest road, and it's not an easy walk for anybody. Amongst bushwalkers, Federation Peak is known as one of the hardest bushwalks in Australia. Just how much harder it's going to be for me is unknown, but I'm on my way to finding out. One thing I learnt from Cradle Mountain is that there had to be a better way than shuffling along on my backside. Full-length legs are all but useless on rough ground, so I've had these shorter ones made, especially for this trip. But what worries me more than anything is how the success of the whole trip depends on them.
This stuff here makes it pretty hard for me because of the grasses on either side catching up in my crutches. It makes it really hard going. The actual gullies aren't too bad because I can straddle them when I need to and get along them that way. But the grass is what I'm finding harder than most. And I've sort of had to modify the way I walk as well, so I'm not twisting so much on the prosthesis and rubbing the skin that's already been rubbed up in the top of my legs.
It takes 3 or 4 days to really wear in my prosthetics and get used to manoeuvring them in the difficult conditions. The average bushwalker on a trip to Federation Peak would have to carry 2 weeks' supply of food to give themselves any chance of climbing the peak. I've estimated that I'm moving at 1/5 of the pace that I used to, so we need to carry a huge amount of food. Taking into consideration people's time constraints, I've broken the trip into 3 sections, each with a separate team, providing support by pack hauling supplies along the track. Each day that I get further and further away from the safety of home, my escape route gets further and further out of reach, pushing the limits of my inner strength. How far can I go? How far would I have to push myself to that point of just closing down and freaking out?
You've got to be joking. Bloody hell. No, you're going amazing.
Well, after
Excellent work.
what I just went through yesterday, Arvo, mate, I'm just about dead.
I'm not surprised.
Throw that back down, son.
No.
It's so important for me to have friends like Ian here supporting me on this trip.
How you been, old chappie?
Having him around assures that no one will get bored and keeps all of our spirits high.
It's so pony.
A blistering pace, you reckon?
Yeah, I thought.
Oh, mate, what's your story? Now you're talking. Jesus.
It gets better.
Give that in the middle. JD, nonetheless.
Well, that's it. Our destination right there in front of us. We've basically spent the last week, 8 days, across the plains behind me now. We've still got a couple of days to go across the plains before we head up into the eastern Arthurs in front there. And that's it. A couple of weeks from there we should be standing up on top of that piece of rock out there. Looks mighty impressive.
Out here, we're totally reliant on the gear that we're carrying on our backs. We have to be completely self-sufficient.
Twisted around heaps, isn't it?
Yeah, shitloads. So that's meant to be right there somewhere, is it? Pretty much.
These crutches were never really designed to move out of the hospital type scenario, or if they were, they might get you hobbling around a shopping centre somewhere. I've really pushed these things to their limit, and I'm hoping that reinforcing them with a couple of tent pegs and hose clamps is going to make them strong enough to see us through.
And work out where we're going.
It's giving me all the support I need. Yeah, here we go up. Woohoo!
Luckman's Lead is the gateway onto the Eastern Arthurs. I've really been looking forward to getting here, to gain some altitude, to get ourselves off the plains and up onto the mountain range. The fact that we're climbing is a huge relief for me. I've trained to climb, not to drag myself through the mud for days on end. Moving up into the mountains increases our vulnerability, exposing us to the full extent of the weather. I've known from the start that it might take a couple of days, but I hadn't banked on this storm coming in. We ended up spending 7 days on Luckman's Lead. 5 of those were spent waiting out the storm.
Oh, it's hot. I remember when we were walking across the ridge, and see you're underneath the scrub. Your head just pokes up above the low scrub, whereas I sort of copped the full force of the horizontal rain and the wind. And I actually noticed, because I was travelling so slowly. See, when you walk, you go much faster, and because we were going much, I noticed this flower hiding.
See, I don't.
And it was out. Unbelievable, wasn't it?
That. All I see is handholds and footholds where I want to put me crutches and where I don't. It's only when I stop that I get a chance to stop for rest, so I get a chance to smell the roses, that's for sure.
It's so incredible. That's why people say it's so wild, because it just changes so quickly, you know. What is amazing he just powers on like a man possessed. Nothing seems to faze him really. Even though the terrain is very, very difficult and it's hard for all of us, but he just has so much determination.
Oh, Wazza, well done. Well done, old chap.
Traversing the Eastern Arthurs is much like traversing the back of a dragon. If you're not going up, then you're going down, and there's not much in between. Abseiling, for me, is one of the most difficult aspects of moving across rock, simply because I can't use my legs to bounce off the wall. Having Jez belay me from below frees up both my hands and allows me to descend with a lot more control. The wet conditions make it extremely treacherous. Everything's slippery, my hands are numb from the cold. I just have to be so much more careful about what I'm doing. Watching the light play across the mountains from day to day, experiencing all the moods of the landscape, gives me a deep connection to the land. I get a lot of satisfaction out of knowing that places like this still exist, and it really saddens me that they're disappearing. Wilderness to me is the ultimate retreat from a world that seems hell-bent on destruction. I first came to Tasmania in 1995 and was immediately captivated by the island's wildness. When I saw the destruction that was going on in the forests of the Tarkine, up in the remote northwest of the state, I found myself unable to stand idly by.
This river's behind us. That's that river that they had to build the other bridge on with that belt.
I spent 12 months on the front line of the Tarkine campaign with a group of young people who became known through the media as the Tarkine Tigers. We had a number of secret tracks that led us through the Tarkine forests, and one of my roles was to get people into the restricted areas, at times under the cover of darkness, and show them firsthand what was happening to the forests. It was in the Tarkine that I realised I wanted to work as a bushwalking guide, to show people the wild places we have. Just over a year after this footage was taken in the Tarkine, I had my accident on Henshawbrook Island.
He's overcome a death experience, and under the rock he thought he was going to die, almost gave up. He came around and he's actually turned that into something extremely positive. He hasn't just sat around, he's converted that into just positive energy, and there's real power in that, and there's real power in nature too, where we are, and both these powers can overcome everything.
I need to be on the peak in the next couple of days. If the weather turns bad again, we won't be able to hang around and wait for it to clear, simply because we're running low on food and there's only so much time you can expect friends to give you. As we near the peak, more problems arise that could potentially stop me from reaching the summit. Firstly, after almost 4 weeks of walking, my thigh muscles have built up and expanded to the point of making it difficult for me to get right down into my sockets. I'm taking pressure in places I'm not supposed to be, and one socket has actually begun to split. I've taped it up to try and stop it cracking any further, but to say it's a bit of a concern is somewhat of an understatement. From here it's only a few hundred metres to the start of the climb, but it will take the better part of the day to get there. This is really starting to be a game of patience here now. We've got to the point where we only need 2 days to get ourselves up to the summit and back. Right now we've had some pretty heavy fog rolling, which means we can't see the sky and we don't know what's happening up there, and we really need that 2-day window of opportunity to get ourselves up to the summit and back down again. And to be realistic about it, we're running out of time. We haven't got a hell of a lot of food left, and we can't afford to sit here for too much longer, so all of us are pretty anxious to get moving as soon as we can. But you know, it's patience. The game of patience rolls on. The next morning we wake to blue sky, and we all know it's time to move. It's now or never. Another problem arises, this time from my impatience to get to the top. I thought we could save some time by taking a more direct route at the start of the climb, but as I gain height, I realise the route is far more difficult than I'd realised, and leaves me facing a horrendous swing across the face if I peel off. With the wet and loose rock, the chances of coming off here are real high. By the time I get back to where I started, we've wasted a valuable 2 hours, leaving me angry at how easily I could have blown it all. Trying to put my feelings into words as I climb the final summit tower seems impossible. The sheer enormity of the moment as it gets closer with each step threatens to overwhelm me. Everything I'd experienced races through my mind. The accident, the loss of my legs, the months of rehabilitation, the 4 weeks I'd just spent dragging myself across the plains and up and down the length of the range. The 4 weeks that had led to this moment. Everybody else stands back as I make my way to the summit marker. I feel a tremendous gratitude to them all. Not just those here with me now, but to everyone who'd played a role in helping me achieve this moment. I wish they could all be here to share with me the incredible feeling of standing on top of Federation Peak. I'm convinced now, more than ever, that nothing is impossible if we dare to face our fears and believe in ourselves.
So we soldier on. We all become possessed in the end. Waz's possession, his will rubs off on us all and fires us all. It's like having your belly fired up and your spirit sort of released into a new consciousness, I guess.